Now that the NBA season has wrapped up with the Golden State Warriors winning their 4th championship in 8 years, now it's time for the NBA offseason. The time of the year that most fans are the most excited about because of the possibility of their favorite team making some improvements. It's not that crazy to say that the start of the offseason is at least just as interesting as the games themselves. Next on deck is the NBA draft. Shortly after that is NBA free agency and NBA summer league. Only 5 teams are projected to have significant cap space to work with, and the only team that's not necessarily rebuilding at the moment is the Portland Trail Blazers. Now it is expected that a lot of the top free agents will end up re-signing with their current team. But no matter what is expected not to happen, there always seems to be a couple of big moves that no one sees coming. So as an NBA fan, you always gotta be ready for anything to go down. In this video, I will discuss the top 10 potential free agents of 2022 and my prediction of where they will end up. At number 10, Bobby Portis. Portis is without a doubt a fan favorite of the Milwaukee Bucks fans. The relentless hustle and energy that this guy brings on a nightly basis is greatly appreciated. Players like Portis are the ones that teams can't afford to lose. Anytime you see Portis step on a basketball court, he's going to give 110% effort every time. If there's a loose ball, you can almost guarantee that Portis will be around somewhere. It's safe to say that he had his best, most productive year of his career this past season. When Lopez was out most of the year, Portis stepped right on in and filled that role, spacing the floor with his shooting and providing some rim protection. He returned to his bench role in the playoffs, and his impact remained the same. Last year, he signed a 2-year, $9 million contract with the Bucks that lets him opt out this summer. Portis was clearly underpaid this past season, and he will and should receive a hefty raise. It could come down to the Bucks choosing to re-sign Portis or Pat Connaughton, who is in the same boat as Portis with a player option. But I believe it's an easy decision to prioritize Portis over Connaughton. I expect Portis to re-sign with the Bucks on a longer-term contract this summer that pays him around $11 to $12 million a year. Coming in at the 9th spot is Anthony Simons. Simons was one of the few bright spots for the Portland Trail Blazers this past season. The Blazers fans dealt with a lot of disappointment, which included a lot of injuries, uninspired play, and trading away a beloved player in CJ McCollum. It was no doubt a very forgetful year for the Blazers. With Damian Lillard being out for the majority of the season, Simons did his best to showcase what he has to offer. He averaged 17 points last year, shooting 44% from the field. In 30 games as a starter, Simons averaged 22 points per game with a true shooting percentage at 60%. Given that he will only be 23 this summer, it seems like he has more room to grow. He's a restricted free agent, so the Blazers have the right to match any offer that is made to him. There's no doubt that Simons can fill it up in a hot minute, but he really doesn't do anything else on the court. He's very limited as a distributor, and there's no reason to believe he can get better. But more importantly, Simons is notoriously a bad defensive player. To get the best out of a talent like Simons, you have to put him in a role similar to a Jamal Crawford or a Lou Williams. Players who weren't good defenders, but could get buckets and provide that necessary spark that a team needs during the occasional scoring droughts. When the dust settles and the Blazers have made other moves first, they will eventually re-sign Simons to a 2 or 3 year deal worth around $13 million a year. Coming in at number 8 on my list is Collin Sexton. Sexton had a couple of big games for the Cleveland Cavaliers as they started the season 7-4. Unfortunately for Sexton, he tore the meniscus in his left knee and missed the rest of the season. Despite that loss, the Cavaliers continued their great play, and Darius Garland made it very clear that he was the young guard that they should build around. Now that doesn't mean there's no room for Sexton on this roster. This team needs another off-the-dribble talent beyond Garland and Karis LeVert. As good as the Cavaliers were on the defensive end, they were also in the bottom 10 in points per game and offensive efficiency. So Sexton's offense is badly needed for this team. But it's important to note that in Garland's 3 seasons, the Cavaliers have been better on offense with Garland on the floor without Collin Sexton than they have been with the two on the floor together. Sources say that Cleveland's front office doesn't believe there's another team willing to give Sexton a big contract, at least the kind of contract that would make the Cavaliers hesitate to re-sign him. Restricted free agency can be a long, frustrating, and drawn-out process. Last summer, no restricted free agent even signed the offer sheet. Lowry market and signing trade did not get done until August last year. The Pistons and the Blazers could be interested in Sexton, but I don't believe that Sexton is a top priority for either team. I have the Cavaliers re-signing Sexton to a 4-year deal worth around $18 million a year. At number 7, Miles Bridges. Bridges was offered a 4-year $60 million deal from the Hornets before the start of last season, but Bridges turned it down and decided to bet on himself. And he certainly made a case that he's worth more than they initially offered. Bridges put up impressive numbers this past season, which proved that he is deserving of a new big contract. The 24-year-old averaged a career-high 20 points, 7 rebounds, and almost 4 assists in 80 games. And he's clearly an important piece to the Charlotte Hornets' future alongside LaMelo Ball. And I don't believe this decision will take as long as I expect Collin Sexton to be. The Pistons and the Spurs are the two teams that could have interest in the 24-year-old, but I don't believe they will give him the big contract he feels he deserves. I believe Bridges and the Hornets will agree on a 4 to 5 year deal worth around $25 million annually. But after signing Bridges to a big deal, the Hornets will have some interesting decisions to make down the road as they try to avoid luxury tax. Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier could be on the chopping block sooner rather than later, and I could see the Hornets looking to move one of them as early as this offseason. At number 6, Jaylen Brunson. Brunson emerged as an all-star level performer last season. He became that other go-to option that Luka Doncic has always needed, whether he was on the court or on the bench. Brunson's strong playoff run will have him getting paid like an all-star this summer. Early in the season, when Brunson was coming off the bench, the Mavericks were a below 500 team. But when he moved to the starting lineup, something started to click with the Mavericks. It was around mid-December, and the Mavericks went from looking like a play-in team to a legit title contender. Now, it's hard to imagine the Mavericks letting him walk. It'll be interesting to see how much Brunson gets paid after making just $6 million over his first 4 years in the league. I believe the Detroit Pistons are the biggest threat to steal Brunson away from the Mavericks, as they will have the cap room to give him almost as much money as the Mavericks could. Now, Dallas is the only team that can offer Brunson a 5th year, and a max deal will end up being around $175 million. For a player who has never been a full-time starter over the course of his first 4 years, a full max for Brunson is something the Mavericks should desperately try to avoid. The Pistons could end up pushing his salary higher than the Mavericks really want to. The more interesting question is what this might do to Dallas's plans going forward. Brunson's new contract could put the Mavericks about $30 million over the luxury tax line. But I have him staying in Dallas. I believe the Mavericks will re-sign him, and it's going to be close to a max deal for a full 5 years. Starting off in my top 5, Deandre Ayton. The Phoenix Suns surprisingly did not extend Ayton before last season. And even though it seemed initially like it wasn't a problem, you can tell by the end of their season that it was obvious. It's hard to imagine one of the best teams in the league letting one of its young stars walk in free agency. Phoenix gave Mikal Bridges a rookie extension before last season, but did not do the same with Deandre Ayton, who is the former number 1 overall pick. That decision had to make Ayton feel some type of way. Ayton was one of 6 players who shot 70% or better on at least 200 shots in the restricted area. He will turn 24 in July, and he is obviously the most talented of the Suns' big men and was a big part of the team's regular season success. He registered career-high marks in both true shooting percentage and defensive rebounding percentage. But the Suns also had success with the other centers, in JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo. The Suns actually outscored their opponents by 20 points per 100 possessions and 239 minutes with the other 4 starters on the court without Deandre Ayton. And you add to the fact that he did not perform in the playoffs, I believe there is no chance that the Suns give him a full 5-year max deal. After the Suns lost in Game 7 in the second round by 33 points, head coach Monty Williams was asked about Ayton's playing time, and he just said it's internal, which is a great indication that there is a problem. Signing and trading DeAndre Ayton could help the Suns skip the luxury tax, both for next season and the 2 seasons to follow. I do believe Ayton could be a more impactful scorer someplace else. At this point, I believe he deserves a fresh new start and a team that values his talent. I believe Ayton will be one of the top free agents who is going to switch teams this summer. It just seems like the writing is already on the wall at this point. I have the Phoenix Suns doing a sign and trade that sends DeAndre Ayton to the Detroit Pistons, with Jeremy Grant coming back to the Suns. Ayton will get the max deal he feels he deserves, and also get the extra touches he believes he deserves to finally live up to his potential. At number 4, Kyrie Irving. Kyrie is probably the most intriguing potential free agent this year. He still is a star player, but the extra baggage and lack of durability makes you question, is he really worth it? You can easily talk yourself into Kyrie, but you can also talk yourself out of signing him to a long-term deal. Irving can opt out of his current deal that pays him around $37 million next season and become a free agent. He will turn 31 next season, so the later years of a 4 or 5 year deal might be a little discouraging. In the short term, the numbers say that he's likely to justify a max deal if he shows up. Whether it's injuries, vaccination status, or personal leave from the team, Kyrie has played fewer than 50% of his games since signing with the Brooklyn Nets in 2019. Even in limited time last season, he averaged 27 points a game with a 59% true shooting percentage. But you have to ask yourself, what other team will really sign Kyrie? What option does Kyrie have besides the Nets? With the cap room teams mostly rebuilding and not really needing a point guard, and other teams likely being turned off by his attitude and lack of commitment over the years, the Nets might be able to negotiate something short of a 5-year deal. But eventually, I believe Kyrie will get exactly what he wants and sign a 4-year max deal that lines up with KD's 4-year extension that is set to begin next season. The Nets will be forced to overpay Kyrie to keep Durant happy, and it may not end like the two envisioned when they first got together in 2019. At number 3, Bradley Beal. It seems like we've been speculating what Bradley Beal is going to do for a few years now. We've heard him say all the right things about wanting to commit to the Washington Wizards. He has all the leverage when negotiating with the Wizards, who will likely be able to offer him a full 5-year, $248 million contract that will be at this moment the largest deal in NBA history. When we're talking about historically large contracts, the player ideally will be an MVP candidate, or at least coming off an all-star season. Beal was neither this past season, as the Wizards went 17-23 overall in his 40 games played. The veteran guard is coming off wrist surgery and shot a career low 30% from 3 and has never been a plus defender. While players like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Steph Curry has more than justified their $200 million contracts, Beal is just not that level of superstar. And even though the first year of his max deal will come close to a projected $42 million, that will climb all the way to $56 million in 2026-27, when Beal is 33. The Wizards can't afford to lowball their franchise player and risk him leaving as an unrestricted free agent or forcing his way out by a trade, so they'll almost certainly end up overpaying him as a result. Beal recently mentioned that he would base his decision on where he feels he can win. If that's really the case, then he won't re-sign back with the Wizards. This team is a first-round exit waiting to happen, if they can even get to the playoffs. I believe Bradley Beal will end up leaving the Wizards and a sign and trade to the Miami Heat. It could get tricky trying to maneuver the right pieces back to the Wizards, but there is a pathway to get a deal done. The deal will obviously center around Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and maybe even PJ Tucker or Max Strus. And number 2, Zach LaVine. LaVine finally enjoyed some team success last season as he reached the playoffs for the first time in his 8th season. He was dealing with a knee injury for most of the season, and the Bulls struggled against quality competition. LaVine certainly has the profile of a max player. He's still just 27 years old, and the Bulls could want to run it back, hoping for better health next season. LaVine is one of 4 players that has averaged at least 20 points on a true shooting percentage of 55% or better in each of the last 4 seasons. But it's certainly fair to question if he's worth a max deal that would pay him more than $40 million in years 3, 4, and 5. LaVine is eligible for a 5-year, $212 million deal from the Bulls that starts at around $37 million in the first year. At age 27, a new contract would cover his prime years if the knee isn't an issue. The franchise gave him a chance to become the star he is today, and that should mean something to LaVine. He was the key piece in the Jimmy Butler trade in 2017, and he has blossomed into a star player and one of the best scorers in the league. I predict that LaVine will stay loyal to Chicago and sign a 5-year max deal as soon as free agency starts. With a few offseason roster tweaks and some better luck with health, the Bulls could be in a better position to make a deeper run in the playoffs next season. And the number 1 free agent on my list is James Harden. The 76ers fans were certainly excited when they first found out that the team finally traded Ben Simmons away, and was even more excited when James Harden was coming to the city of brotherly love. But the honeymoon phase for James Harden in Philly didn't last too long, and after the Sixers got blown out by the Brooklyn Nets in March, the pressure on Harden started to build after every game. Paying Harden for who he was is far different than paying him for who he's going to be. James Harden will be 33 years old before the season starts, and he is coming off his lowest scoring average in the playoffs since he was in Oklahoma City. Harden has a player option for $47 million next season. If he opts out, he can re-sign a new deal starting at a maximum of $46 million in the first year. Even if Harden doesn't get the full max in Philly, Morey has to keep him on a long-term deal to help justify the Ben Simmons trade. Harden is still one of the NBA's best playmakers, and he can still get buckets, but he just wasn't as efficient last season. But he will likely get paid like one of the league's top players, something he may no longer be. I believe Harden and the 76ers will be able to agree on a max deal, but instead of it being around 5 years, it'll be around 3 years. The Sixers really have no choice but to bring him back, and hopefully Harden can get more comfortable and bounce back with a good training camp in his first full season with the team.